Before dawn on that December morning in 1944, specifically at 5:30 in the morning, German soldiers positioned along what was known as the Schnee-Eifel Ridge found themselves preparing for an assault that would mark the beginning of one of the most significant battles of the Second World War. This ridge, situated where Belgium meets Germany, was shrouded in the kind of thick mist that comes before sunrise, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation. The American 106th Infantry Division had established their defensive positions across this terrain, unaware that within hours they would face the opening moves of what history would remember as the Battle of the Bulge. The German forces assembled for this attack belonged to the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, a unit of the Wehrmacht that carried with them a weapon that had become synonymous with German military prowess over decades of warfare. This weapon was the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle whose design traced its lineage back to the First World War, a conflict in which many of these soldiers' fathers had fought using remarkably similar firearms. The rifle had proven itself across every theatre of German military operations, from the initial invasion of Poland through the vast expanses of the Eastern Front, right up to the very gates of Moscow itself. Its reputation for precision, reliability, and combat effectiveness was unmatched in German military circles. What these German soldiers could not have known as they prepared for their assault was that the tactical framework their military had constructed around this weapon, a framework that emphasized the 5-round magazine capacity and the mechanical operation of the bolt-action system, had become fundamentally outdated when confronted with the reality of American semi-automatic firepower. The very mathematics that governed infantry combat had undergone a transformation that the German High Command had failed to fully appreciate or address. While a well-trained German soldier operating his Karabiner 98K could achieve approximately 15 aimed shots within the span of a single minute, his American counterpart equipped with the M1 Garand rifle could deliver between 20 and 24 aimed rounds in that same time frame. This disparity in rate of fire would prove to be a determining factor in engagement after engagement throughout the remaining months of the war. The German military's confidence in the Karabiner 98K was far from unfounded or irrational. The Mauser action mechanism upon which it was based had undergone continuous refinement since its introduction in 1898, representing what many considered to be the absolute apex of bolt-action rifle engineering. The military doctrine that had been carefully documented and taught through training materials such as Der Dienstunterricht im Heer placed paramount importance on marksmanship quality rather than quantity of fire. German military philosophy held that a single well-aimed shot possessed greater tactical value than 20 rounds scattered without precision. This approach to warfare had served German forces exceptionally well in their conquest of much of Europe. The same fundamental rifle design had seen service in colonial campaigns throughout the First World War and during the stunning early victories of the Second World War, when German forces seemed nearly unstoppable. The tactical system that German infantry employed centered around the MG-42 machine gun as the primary source of suppressive fire, with individual riflemen contributing carefully aimed shots to support the overall fire scheme. This was a methodology that had enabled German forces to conquer Poland in a matter of weeks and to bring France to its knees in just 6 weeks of fighting. However, researchers from the United States Army who conducted detailed analysis after the war's conclusion discovered something revealing about German training methods. German soldiers were being trained to engage targets at ranges between 400 and 800 meters, despite the fact that combat statistics consistently demonstrated that the overwhelming majority of actual engagements took place at distances well under 300 meters. This fundamental disconnect between training emphasis and combat reality would extract a heavy toll when German forces found themselves facing American troops whose weapons had been designed and optimized for the ranges at which fighting actually occurred. The first significant encounter between the Wehrmacht and American forces equipped with M1 Garand rifles took place in February of 1943 at a location known as Kasserine Pass. While the battle itself resulted in a tactical victory for German forces, the after-action reports that were submitted to German High Command contained observations that were troubling, yet these warnings were largely dismissed or downplayed at the time. According to documentation maintained by United States Army historians, German units reported encountering levels of rifle fire from American positions that exceeded their expectations by a considerable margin. Elements of the 10th Panzer Division, specifically their reconnaissance units, engaged portions of the United States Second Corps and documented that American infantry forces were capable of maintaining continuous streams of fire even while executing fighting withdrawals, a tactical maneuver that would be extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, to execute effectively with bolt-action rifles. Analysis of German casualty reports from the Kasserine engagement, which was conducted by United States intelligence services, revealed a pattern of disproportionate losses occurring during pursuit phases of the battle. Even though American forces were in retreat, they maintained steady defensive fire that inflicted casualties on their pursuers at rates that seemed inconsistent with a force in disarray. However, because the overall battle had ended in German success, these warning signs were largely overlooked or attributed to other factors. The prevailing German assessment was that American forces lacked experience and suffered from poor leadership, and that surely these deficiencies could not be compensated for by superior equipment when facing German tactical excellence. The campaign in Italy that stretched from 1943 into 1944 provided German forces with extended and sustained exposure to American firepower in terrain that initially appeared to favour defenders armed with bolt-action rifles engaging at extended ranges. The mountainous landscape characteristic of the Italian peninsula should theoretically have provided advantages to defenders who could engage attacking forces at longer distances. During the Battle for San Pietro in December of 1943, the 29th Panzer Grenadier Division encountered sustained American rifle fire that contradicted German tactical assumptions about how infantry combat should unfold. Combat interviews conducted by the United States Army immediately following the battle provided documentation that American riflemen possessed the capability to maintain suppressive fire while simultaneously executing tactical maneuvers, with each individual soldier effectively functioning as his own mobile firebase, rather than the German model of relying primarily on squad automatic weapons for suppression. German defensive positions established along what was known as the Winter Line, particularly in the area surrounding Monte Cassino, reported experiencing difficulty in countering American patrol tactics. Reports generated by United States Army units indicated that American patrols, whose soldiers were armed predominantly with M1 Garand rifles, could generate sufficient volumes of fire to suppress German defensive positions, while simultaneously maneuvering to advantageous positions, forcing defenders to remain under cover or risk exposure to continuous incoming fire. The battles fought along the Gothic Line during 1944 demonstrated the cumulative impact of this firepower disparity. German defensive doctrine called for defenders to emerge from cover during the pauses between enemy shots to return fire, but when facing semi-automatic weapons, these pauses essentially ceased to exist. Wehrmacht units reported to their higher headquarters that American infantry possessed fire superiority at all engagement ranges below 500 meters. The invasion of Normandy brought this disparity in firepower into sharp and unmistakable focus. The 352nd Infantry Division, which bore responsibility for defending Omaha Beach, consisted of experienced and well-trained troops who occupied prepared defensive positions with carefully pre-registered fields of fire. Despite every advantage that preparation and positioning could provide, these defenders found themselves gradually overwhelmed by the sheer volume of aimed rifle fire emanating from advancing American units. Historical documentation maintained by the United States Army from the Normandy landings records that soldiers of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, despite suffering devastating casualties during the initial assault on Omaha Beach, maintained the capability to deliver suppressive fire while advancing up the bluffs toward German positions. German strongpoints that had been designed and constructed to withstand artillery bombardment found themselves gradually suppressed by the cumulative effect of thousands upon thousands of 30-06 rounds being fired from M1 Garand rifles. The hedgerow fighting that came to characterize the Normandy campaign after the initial beach landings created engagement ranges that frequently measured 50 meters or less. At these extremely close distances, the rate at which a weapon could be fired proved far more valuable than long-range precision accuracy. American tactical doctrine, which had been developed at Fort Benning and subsequently refined through actual combat experience, emphasized what was termed marching fire, the concept of advancing while maintaining continuous fire from every rifleman in the unit. Analysis conducted by United States Army historians after the war determined that American rifle companies operating in Normandy expended an average of 5,000 rounds per day during periods of active combat, while comparable German rifle companies expended approximately 1,500 rounds during similar periods. This disparity reflected not wasteful ammunition expenditure, but rather fundamentally different tactical capabilities. American forces could maintain suppressive fire because every single soldier in an infantry unit carried a semi-automatic rifle capable of rapid fire. The M1 Garand rifle, which had been designed by John Garand, a Canadian-American engineer, and adopted by the United States Army in 1936, represented a fundamental alteration in the way infantry tactics could be executed. While it fired the same 30-06 cartridge as its predecessor, the Springfield rifle, it incorporated an 8-round on-block clip and a gas-operated semi-automatic action that eliminated the need for manual cycling between shots. When comparing the technical specifications, the M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds and measured 43.5 inches in overall length, while the Carabiner 98K weighed 8.8 pounds and measured 49.2 inches in length. The M1's magazine capacity of 8 rounds compared favourably to the Car 98K's 5-round capacity, and more importantly, its semi-automatic action allowed for a rate of fire between 40 and 50 rounds per minute for aimed shots, while the bolt-action German rifle could manage only 15 rounds per minute under similar conditions. This technical superiority translated directly into transformed squad-level tactics. While German squad organization concentrated firepower in the machine gun, treating individual riflemen primarily as supporters and ammunition carriers, American squad tactics distributed meaningful firepower across all squad members. Each United States rifle squad possessed the capability to generate between 160 and 200 rounds per minute of aimed fire, compared to a German squad's 40 to 70 rounds per minute from rifles alone, not counting machine gun fire. While German squads relied exclusively on the MG-42 machine gun for achieving suppressive effects, American squads achieved similar suppressive effects through the combined rifle fire of all squad members. The Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944 demonstrated beyond any doubt the complete superiority of semi-automatic rifles in the context of modern combat. The Wehrmacht launched what would be its last major offensive operation with veteran troops and the significant advantage of complete surprise, yet discovered that their tactical doctrine proved ineffective when confronted with American firepower. Kampfgruppe Piper, which served as the spearhead element of the 6th Panzer Army, encountered elements of the United States 99th Infantry Division near a place called Lanzerath on the 16th of December. Records maintained by the United States Army document that despite being heavily outnumbered, American infantry platoons succeeded in delaying the German advance through sustained rifle fire that prevented German infantry from effectively supporting their armoured vehicles. In the area near Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division found itself surrounded and heavily outnumbered, yet managed to hold their defensive perimeter partly due to the firepower advantage provided by the M1 Garand rifle. Combat reports from this engagement indicate that German attacks following traditional doctrine, advancing under the covering fire of machine guns, were repeatedly disrupted and broken up by the sheer volume of American rifle fire. The numerous small unit actions that took place throughout the Ardennes region revealed a consistent and unmistakable pattern. German infantry forces, who had been trained in fire and movement tactics that assumed pauses would exist between enemy shots during which they could advance, discovered that no such pauses existed when facing semi-automatic weapons. American soldiers possessed the capability to fire while moving, to reload quickly using the en-bloc clip system, and to maintain continuous suppression of enemy positions. The industrial story behind the M1 Garand's deployment proved to be as decisive as its battlefield performance. Springfield Armory and Winchester. Repeating Arms Company together produced 4,040,800 M1 Garand rifles during the course of World War II. Peak production at Springfield Armory reached 3,936 rifles per day during January of 1944. When comparing production figures, the United States manufactured 4,040,800 M1 Garands, while Germany produced approximately 462,000 of their semi-automatic G43 and K43 rifles, resulting in a ratio of 8.7 to 1 in favor of the United States. This production disparity meant that while fewer than 5% of German infantry soldiers carried semi-automatic rifles, 100% of American infantry received M1 Garands as their standard weapon. The United States achieved this mass production through innovative manufacturing techniques that transformed how complex weapons could be produced. Specialized machinery, assembly line methods borrowed from automotive manufacturing, and standardized parts with fully interchangeable components allowed for unprecedented production rates. Springfield Armory underwent a complete transformation from a traditional government arsenal to a modern production facility. By using techniques that had been developed in automobile factories, workers who had never previously built firearms could perform single, repetitive operations that collectively produced thousands of rifles daily. Each operation was simplified and standardized to the point where relatively unskilled workers could achieve the precision necessary for military firearms production. The Wehrmacht attempted to adapt to this firepower disparity through several different measures. The Gewehr 43, which was a German-designed semi-automatic rifle, entered production in 1943, but never achieved sufficient production numbers to equip more than specialist units and designated marksmen. The revolutionary STG-44 assault rifle, which began entering service in late 1943, pointed the way toward the future of infantry weapons, but with only 425,000 units produced, it could not fundamentally change the arithmetic of battlefield firepower. German tactical manuals underwent revisions in 1944 to formally acknowledge American firepower superiority. These new defensive tactics emphasized the need for deeper entrenchments, increased reliance on mortars and artillery, and avoiding direct firefights with American infantry whenever tactically possible. However, these adaptations represented tactical retreats from contact rather than actual solutions to the underlying problem. United States Army intelligence observers noted that German units operating on the Western Front increasingly avoided offensive operations that would require infantry assault, recognizing their fundamental disadvantage in direct fire engagements. This increasingly defensive mindset, which was forced upon them by material inferiority, contributed significantly to the Wehrmacht's inability to regain the initiative after the American breakout from Normandy. The M1 Garand's superiority affected combined arms tactics in ways that extended beyond simple infantry versus infantry engagements. German doctrine required close cooperation between infantry and armoured units, with infantry advancing alongside tanks to provide protection against anti-tank teams. American rifle fire made this essential coordination extremely difficult to execute. During Operation Cobra, which was the American breakout from Normandy in July of 1944, German panzer units reported that their accompanying infantry forces could not maintain contact with advancing armour due to the intensity of American small arms fire. Tanks advancing without infantry support proved highly vulnerable to bazooka teams and artillery observers who could operate with relative impunity. The M1 Garand also significantly enhanced American defensive capabilities. During the German counter-offensive at Mortain in August of 1944, the United States 30th Infantry Division held critical defensive positions partly due to their ability to generate sustained defensive fire from every position. Each American foxhole could produce continuous aimed fire, making German infantry assault tactics prohibitively costly in terms of casualties. American forces had refined their semi-automatic rifle tactics in the Pacific Theater of Operations before applying these lessons in Europe. Against Japanese forces who were similarly armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, United States Marine Corps and Army units developed techniques that maximized their firepower advantage. The concept of what was termed vertical envelopment, suppressing enemy positions with rifle fire while simultaneously maneuvering to attack from unexpected angles, proved equally effective against German forces. The tactical flexibility provided by distributed firepower across all soldiers allowed American units to maintain constant pressure while maneuvering, a capability that German units equipped with bolt-action rifles simply could not match. The M1 Garand's significantly higher rate of fire necessitated a revolutionary approach to ammunition supply and logistics. American divisions operating in Europe required approximately 10 times the quantity of small arms ammunition as equivalent German units. The United States Army met this enormous demand through an unprecedented logistics effort that involved massive industrial production. The Lake City Army ammunition plant alone produced in excess of 3 million rounds of .30-06 ammunition every single day by 1944. The Red Ball Express, which became a famous truck convoy system, prioritized ammunition delivery to frontline units above many other supply categories. American soldiers typically carried between 80 and 100 rounds of ammunition compared to German soldiers carrying 60 rounds, and American forces enjoyed constant resupply availability. This abundance of ammunition enabled distinctly American tactical doctrine. United States forces routinely employed what was called reconnaissance by fire, shooting at suspected enemy positions to provoke a response that would reveal their location. German forces, who had been trained to conserve ammunition carefully, found this tactic both wasteful and incomprehensible from their doctrinal perspective, yet also found it highly effective and difficult to counter. The United States Army developed comprehensive training programs specifically designed around the capabilities of the M1 Garand. At Fort Benning, which served as the infantry school, instructors created courses that emphasized rapid target engagement over traditional precision marksmanship. Soldiers learned instinctive shooting techniques, quickly acquiring and engaging targets without achieving a perfect sight picture before firing. The Trainfire program, which was introduced in 1943, utilized pop-up targets at varying ranges to simulate actual combat conditions. Soldiers fired hundreds of rounds during training, building muscle memory for rapid engagement that would serve them in combat. This approach contrasted sharply with German training that emphasized deliberate, precise shooting with carefully limited ammunition expenditure. American tactical doctrine evolved continuously to maximize the advantages provided by semi-automatic rifles. Fire teams could execute fire and movement tactics with far greater flexibility, as any soldier could provide effective suppressive fire while others maneuvered to better positions. The traditional distinction between designated fire elements and maneuver elements became blurred when every soldier possessed the capability to maintain rapid fire. During the assault on the Siegfried Line fortifications in the fall of 1944, American forces demonstrated how semi-automatic rifles could overcome even heavily prepared defenses. German fortifications, which had been designed and constructed to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones for machine guns, proved vulnerable to the cumulative effect of sustained rifle fire. The United States First Army reported that M1 Garand fire could effectively suppress German bunker apertures, allowing engineers to approach with demolition charges. The volume of fire that a single American platoon could generate had the capability to neutralize multiple German defensive positions simultaneously, preventing these positions from providing mutual support to one another. The battle for the city of Aachen in October of 1944 showcased urban combat conditions where the advantages of the M1 Garand were magnified significantly. At the close quarters typical of urban fighting, the ability to fire 8 rounds rapidly without needing to work a bolt between shots proved absolutely decisive. American soldiers could clear rooms and buildings far more effectively than their German counterparts, who had to manually cycle their rifles after each shot. The M1 Garand's gas-operated system proved more reliable in adverse conditions than many had initially expected. During the harsh winter conditions of 1944 and 1945, the rifle continued functioning reliably in extreme cold that caused operational problems for other weapons systems. The design's enclosed operating rod and gas system resisted contamination from mud and debris more effectively than the exposed bolt action of the Carabiner 98K. While both rifles required regular maintenance, the M1's semi-automatic action meant that soldiers spent considerably less time with their weapons exposed to enemy fire during reloading procedures. The N-block clip system, which had initially been criticized by some for the distinctive ping sound it made when ejecting after the last round was fired, actually proved advantageous in combat conditions. Soldiers could reload by feel alone in darkness or poor visibility conditions, simply pressing the clip into the receiver where it would be automatically seated. German soldiers, by contrast, had to individually load rounds into their rifles' internal magazines, a slower process requiring greater manual dexterity and visual attention. The M1 Garand represented American industrial philosophy applied directly to warfare, emphasizing mass production of good enough quality rather than handcrafted precision. Each rifle cost approximately $85 to produce in 1944. A figure comparable to the cost of producing a Carabiner 98K, but American factories produced them approximately 3 times faster than German facilities could manufacture their rifles. This production efficiency extended throughout the entire supply chain. Standardized ammunition, fully interchangeable parts, and simplified maintenance procedures reduced the overall logistics burden significantly. A damaged M1 Garand could often be repaired quickly by swapping components from other rifles, while repairs to a Carabiner 98K might require skilled armourer work and custom fitting. The strategic impact of this production advantage was profound and far-reaching. America could simultaneously equip its rapidly expanding army with modern weapons while maintaining high levels of production for tanks, aircraft, and ships. Germany, facing increasingly severe resource constraints and systematic bombing of industrial facilities, could not match this production capacity even with the theoretically simpler bolt-action rifles. After Germany's surrender in May of 1945, United States Army operational research teams conducted extensive and detailed studies on infantry combat effectiveness throughout the war. Their analysis, which was based on comprehensive combat records and interrogations of prisoners, confirmed the decisive impact of the M1 Garand on the conduct of infantry warfare. Statistical analysis of combat data revealed several key findings. American rifle companies generated approximately 340% more small arms fire than equivalent German units. The average duration of engagements increased from between 5 and 10 minutes to between 30 and 45 minutes due to the sustained fire capabilities that semi-automatic rifles provided. Perhaps most significantly, American infantry possessed the capability to advance under their own fire support without needing to wait for machine guns or mortars to provide covering fire. General George S. Patton, one of America's most aggressive and successful commanders, called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. This assessment reflected not merely the rifle's individual technical qualities, but rather its complete transformation of how infantry combat could be conducted. The weapon enabled American tactical doctrine that emphasized firepower, mobility, and aggressive action at every level. German military professionals writing in the years after the war acknowledged their failure to appreciate the importance of semi-automatic rifles before it was too late to address the disparity. General Franz Halder, who had served as chief of the German General Staff, noted in his post-war writings that the Wehrmacht had fundamentally underestimated how superiority in basic infantry weapons could overcome traditional advantages in training and combat experience. When West Germany rearmed in 1955 as part of the Cold War Western Alliance, the newly formed Bundeswehr immediately adopted automatic weapons as standard infantry firearms, initially selecting the FNFAL rifle, which they designated as the G1, and later transitioning to the G3 rifle. No German military force would ever again field bolt-action rifles as primary infantry weapons, a decision that directly reflected lessons learned through bitter experience in World War II. Bundeswehr planning documents explicitly emphasized that future German forces must never again face technological disadvantage in basic infantry weapons. The trauma of confronting superior American firepower shaped German military procurement decisions and doctrine for decades into the Cold War era. The success of the M1 Garand influenced military thinking across the entire world. Every major military power adopted either semi-automatic or fully automatic rifles in the immediate post-war period. The Soviet Union's SKS, and later the famous AK-47, Britain's EM2 rifle, and France's MAS-49 all reflected lessons learned from the American demonstration of semi-automatic superiority in combat. The Korean War, which erupted in 1950, proved these lessons correct once again. American forces armed with M1 Garand rifles initially held significant advantages over North Korean and Chinese forces who were equipped with bolt-action rifles, though this advantage gradually diminished as communist forces received increasing quantities of Soviet semi-automatic and automatic weapons. The tactical innovations that had been developed specifically for the M1 Garand went on to influence modern infantry doctrine in fundamental ways. The concept of distributed firepower, treating every soldier as a significant contributor to unit firepower rather than primarily as ammunition carriers for machine guns, became standard practice in Western militaries. Modern squad tactics, which emphasize flexibility and rapid decision-making at the lowest organizational levels, evolved directly from capabilities first provided by semi-automatic rifles. The ability of individual soldiers to provide effective suppressive fire while simultaneously maneuvering remains fundamental to contemporary infantry operations around the world. The M1 Garand demonstrated conclusively that industrial capacity could provide decisive tactical advantage on the battlefield. America's ability to mass-produce complex weapons while maintaining acceptable quality standards proved that 20th-century warfare required industrial might as much as military skill and experience. This lesson extended far beyond small arms production. The same production philosophy and industrial methods that created millions of M1 Garand rifles also produced tens of thousands of tanks, aircraft, and ships that equipped American and Allied forces. The integration of mass production techniques with military requirements revolutionized how warfare logistics and planning were conducted. The impact of the M1 Garand went beyond pure firepower statistics and rate of fire comparisons. It provided American soldiers, many of whom were civilian conscripts with minimal military experience and training, with a tangible technological advantage over professional German soldiers who had been trained in military arts from youth. This technological edge provided a significant boost to morale and confidence, contributing to the aggressive tactical execution that characterized American operations. Conversely, German forces experienced progressive demoralization as they repeatedly faced superior enemy weapons that rendered their training and experience less effective. Post-war studies indicated that German morale, recruitment, training quality, and overall combat effectiveness in the war's final years were all negatively affected by the knowledge that they faced technologically superior opponents. The superiority of the M1 Garand over the Karabiner 98K represented far more than a simple technological advantage in one category of equipment. It marked the definitive end of an entire era in how infantry combat was conceived and conducted. The age of the bolt-action rifle, which had dominated battlefields continuously since the 1890s, came to an end in the hedgerows of Normandy, the dense forests of the Ardennes, and among the rubbled ruins of German cities during the final campaigns of the war. German forces had entered World War II with complete confidence in their tactical doctrine, their superiority in training, and their extensive combat experience. What they discovered, often at terrible cost, was that American mass production capability combined with semi-automatic technology had rendered their entire approach to infantry combat fundamentally obsolete. The Wehrmacht's bolt-action rifles, regardless of the skill and dedication of the soldiers who carried them into battle, simply could not compete with the volume of accurate, aimed fire that American semi-automatic weapons produced. The transformation was both complete and irreversible in its implications for future warfare. No major military force anywhere in the world would ever again field bolt-action rifles as the primary infantry weapon for standard troops. The lessons that were learned during the period from 1943 to 1945, demonstrating that firepower, industrial production capacity, and technological innovation could overcome traditional military virtues of training and experience, fundamentally shaped military thinking for the remainder of the 20th century and continue to influence military planning today. The M1 Garand accomplished more than simply helping the Allied forces win World War II. It revolutionized the fundamental nature of infantry combat in ways that persist to the present day. Every time a German soldier paused in combat to work the bolt of his rifle, while American bullets cracked through the air overhead, the future of warfare was being written in real time. That future clearly belonged to nations that could successfully harness industrial might to provide their soldiers with decisive technological advantages at every level of equipment. The Wehrmacht had expected to fight a war in which training, doctrine, and combat experience would prove to be the decisive factors. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy whose industrial democracy had provided every single soldier with a semi-automatic rifle and virtually unlimited ammunition to feed it. In that fundamental mismatch between expectations and reality lay not just tactical defeat in individual battles, but the end of an entire conception of how warfare should be conducted. The M1 Garand had made both the bolt-action rifle and the entire military doctrine that had been constructed around it completely obsolete. The German army had never expected to face this challenge. They never successfully adapted to it despite their best efforts, and ultimately they never recovered from its effects on their combat effectiveness. The 8-round en-bloc clip had defeated the 5-round stripper clip, and with that technical victory came the defeat of an entire philosophy of war that had served Germany for generations. The age of industrial warfare had definitively arrived on the battlefields of World War II, delivered one semi-automatic shot at a time by millions of American soldiers carrying M1 Garand rifles. This historical analysis draws upon documented military records, comprehensive post-war studies, and technical evaluations that were conducted by the United States Army and numerous military historians in the decades following the war. While the analysis presents interpretations of tactical impacts and strategic implications, all battle dates, unit designations, production figures, and technical specifications are drawn from verified historical sources. The analysis represents historical interpretation based on the totality of available evidence, rather than definitive claims about individual soldier experiences, which naturally varied widely depending on specific circumstances and situations encountered in combat.